Hello everyone, good evening. So, welcome to another session of Environment and Ecology. All right, we are continuing with the UPSC series for your environment portion. And this is the 7th lecture of the series. We have already finished up to 6 lectures and looked into various topics. We were actually doing the topic on pollution. Okay, on Saturday, previous class, we had looked up to water pollution. Okay, water pollution and noise pollution. So the rest of it I will be taking today. That it's a really big chapter, so I'll be completing. Anyway, I will be completing that today, and tomorrow we will move on to the next topic. Okay, so I welcome you all to Madhav Sankar classes. So if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. Also, please like and share this video with your friends. Okay, so without any further ado, let's begin this session. Once again, very good evening to all of you. If you are new to this channel, please feel free to ask any doubts or queries in the comment section. I will be looking into the comments once in a while. Okay, and I will also be uploading all my all my notes into the Telegram channel. The link is given here at the top. It's also given in the YouTube description section. You can simply click it and directly go to the Telegram channel, where you will find all the notes and steps from my side. Okay, so environmental pollution part 2. We have completed up to, I think it's noise pollution. So this is the next topic. All right. So radioactive pollution. So what exactly is radioactive pollution? But before, what is radioactivity? Radioactivity is actually a phenomenon of spontaneous emission of alpha particles, which are protons, beta particles or electrons, and gamma rays, which are short wave electromagnetic waves, due to the degeneration of atomic nuclei of some elements. So certain elements actually undergo atomic decomposition, nuclear decomposition. Okay, and when this happens, a lot of things are emitted out, like alpha particles, beta particles, gamma rays. Okay, so this process is known as the radioactivity. And in a lot of cases, these emissions are very, very dangerous, and hence we call them as pollutants. Okay, so what are the types of radiations? Broadly, these radiations are categorized as non-ionizing radiations and ionizing radiations. Non-ionizing radiations are those which which affects only those things that absorb them. For example, if certain particles are emitted and hits our skin will absorb these particles, and that's it. Okay, it does not penetrate into our body. Got it? Such things are known as non-ionization radiations. They have very, very low penetrability. Second one is ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiations have very high penetration, and it can cause huge damage at very high levels. Okay, you know that when high levels of radioactivity is exposed, the person can even die or contract cancer, etc., etc. Correct? Mutations can happen. All these are because of these ionizing radiations, which can penetrate through our body and create a lot of changes. Okay, 1 second, let me change the color. Okay, now what are the types of radiation particles? So these two are the types of radiations: non-ionizing type of radiations, which are comparatively less harmful, and then ionizing radiations, which cause all the trouble. Then types of radiation particles. Earlier at the beginning itself, I told you 3 types of things are emitted during a radioactivity, predominantly alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma rays. So alpha particles, these actually can be blocked by a piece of paper and human skin. So not too much of an issue. Okay, even something that as thin as a paper or as thin as a human skin can block them and prevent it going any further. Then comes beta particles. Beta particles are much more have a higher penetrable strength. It can penetrate through our skin, but it can be blocked by some things like glass, metal, etc., etc. So that is also to a level it's okay. Gamma rays, these are the most powerful ones. This can penetrate very easily through human skin, damage of internal organs, cellular composition. Okay, and this can only be blocked by very thick layers of concrete. This is why nuclear reactors are, usually constructed in a very isolated place and have huge precautions. When a nuclear meltdown happens, these kinds of rays emit. Alpha particles, yeah, it's fine. You can handle them. Beta also, with proper precautions, it's possible. Gamma are extremely dangerous, and you need to take care of, you need to have very, very, state-of-the-art protection gears. Okay, you have heard about Chernobyl and all, right? Chernobyl disaster and all. If you have not, you can watch a web series called Chernobyl. It's a small series, like 7 episodes or something like that. And it will give you a very good idea about what this radioactivity is. Okay, moving on. Radioactive pollution sources. But before going into the sources of radioactive pollution, you need to understand a phrase called period of radioactivity. What is the period of radioactivity? Every radioactive nuclei has a constant decay rate. Okay, it doesn't decay all of a sudden, and it's not like that. There is a rate of decay. It takes some time. Okay, so an associated term is half-life. Half-life is the time needed for half of its atoms to decay. Okay, if you have some nuclear material, its half-life means the time taken for half of its atoms to decay or decompose. And this half-life varies for different radioactive substances. It's something for uranium, it's something else for thorium, it's something else for another metal. Clear? So some of the half-lives are very instant. The half-life time is like very quick, immediate. But in certain cases, the half-life is like over decades or even longer than that. So these things, which takes a long time to decay and decompose, are the main threat. Okay, because it will keep on emitting radioactive radiations for a very long time and causes all kinds of issues. Clear? So what are the prominent sources? Obviously, there are natural sources and man-made sources. So natural sources are from the nature, like the cosmic rays from the space. Correct? When stars and all explode, okay, when stars become supernova again becomes a white dwarf and then a black hole. So stars and sun, etc., they emit different kinds of radiation. You know what happens in sun and stars, right? There are two kinds of nuclear reactions that happen there. One is nuclear fission, other one is nuclear fusion. Okay, so mostly nuclear fusion. That is why they have so much energy. And these waves are emitted, many kinds of rays are emitted, and these are all natural. It happens anyway. And they are the natural sources of radioactive pollution. Also, in some cases, there are some terrestrial radiations from the radioactive nuclides present in the Earth's crust. Okay, Earth has a lot of elements. Some of them are radioactive, and they also emit some sort of radiations, and they causes all these issues. So these are natural. Then we have man-made. Okay, which are they? Nuclear power plants, nuclear weapons. You remember 1945, right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So nuclear weapons, disposal of nuclear waste. This is a huge concern. We all, invest a lot into nuclear power plants because they are very, you can build it in a very small area, and it's very much cost effective. Using very less amount of raw material, you can produce a lot of energy. Clear? So that is the advantage of nuclear power plant. Problem is, what happens to, or how do you dispose of this nuclear waste? You can't take it and put it in a dustbin, correct? You have to properly dispose it off, otherwise they will keep on emitting radiations and cause all sorts of issues. Similarly, mining for certain nuclear materials such as uranium, radiation therapy. It's a medical process done for a lot of things, and this radiation therapy also causes different sorts of pollution. These are the predominant sources of radioactive pollution. Now, what are its effects? But before going into the exact effects, you have to understand that the effects depends on a lot of things. For example, half-life. Okay, so if the half-life is very short and very small, no, effects are like mild to moderate. But if the half-life is very long, what happens? You will be continuously exposed to this for a prolonged period of time, and this can cause severe issues. Similarly, energy releasing capacity. If the energy releasing capacity is very high, then these waves will have very high energy, and this can penetrate even deeper and cause bigger issues. Rate of diffusion and rate of deposition of the pollutant. Again, if it is dissolves fast, or if the rate of deposition is very high, that will the pollution also changes accordingly. So based on all these factors, the effects of radioactive pollution also keeps on changing. And not just these, even other factors, other environmental factors such as wind, temperature, rainfall, all these can influence how much radiation pollution happens. Okay, so again, coming back to our types of pollution, non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation. I told you non-ionizing radiations, you can actually block it with your skin or a paper. I mean, it doesn't penetrate too much. The penetration power is very, very less. Okay, so these are short wave radiations. Keep that in mind. These are short wave radiations such as UV, correct, with low penetrating power. But that does not mean it does not create any kinds of issues. Yes, it doesn't penetrate inwards, but wherever it hits, it will create problem. So ultraviolet rays, what happens if it hits our skin for a very long time? It can cause various skin issues. Correct. Similarly, it damages our eye. Have you heard about snow blindness? This happens in very high altitudes. When there is adequate deposition of snow, what happens is when the sun is very bright. Okay, when sun comes up and it's really bright, heat won't be there, but the light will be so intense that the snow reflects this light into our eyes, and this can actually blind us. Okay, this is known as snow blindness. This can happen in, say, deserts also. The desert sand can actually reflect a lot of light back to our eyes. Terrestrial radiation. Similarly, people say that do not look into the sun during solar eclipse. Correct, you have to look through a film or something like that. True, this is also same issue, because UV rays will directly hit our eyes and create issues. Sunburns. This is very much associated whenever we have a heat wave. Correct. Our skin will become reddish. It can develop some rashes. You might be dehydrated, lose consciousness, and even in certain severe cases, you might even die. So non-ionizing radiations can cause these things. Remember, they are short-wave radiations with less penetrating power. Then we have ionizing radiation. These are high penetration power radiations such as X-rays, cosmic rays, atomic radiations, etc., etc. Think about it. The doctors use X-rays to check our bones and all. Correct. If you have some bone pain, or say if you have some fracture or broken bone or something like that, when you go to hospital, the doctor will ask you to perform an X-ray. So after taking an X-ray, when you look at the film, you can see the bone. You cannot see anything else, and everything else is like translucent. Correct? Your skin doesn't appear there because these radiations can pass through and penetrate through our skin. It is blocked only by the bone. That is why bone is very visible. Clear? So X-rays have a higher penetrating power. So X-rays, similarly cosmic rays, atomic radiations, all these are examples of ionizing radiations. The molecular damage may range from short range to long range. Sometimes these are short range damage. For example, immediately it can cause some skin issues. Certain cases it can even cause death. Okay, but long range effects such as cancer, mutation, etc. are long or delayed effects. After a prolonged exposure, eventually at cellular level there will be mutations, and the entire structure and composition of your cell changes. Clear? So these are the types of radiations and their potentials. Now, control measures. So you have all these kinds of radiations and pollutions, etc., etc. So how do you control them? How are we still alive? Okay, so obviously prevention is better than cure. Rather than going for control measures, try to prevent the need for it. Impose adequate safety measures wherever applicable. Leakages from radioactive elements should be totally checked. Safe disposal of nuclear waste. Regular monitoring. Nuclear explosions and nuclear warheads has to be strictly banned. Okay, we have the NSG group and all, no? Nuclear suppliers group and all. So which aims for, which at least try to contain the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Okay, NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Please do study about them also when you go for the prelims next year or mains this year. Appropriate steps should be taken to protect occupation exposure. In various cases, people work in different places. There are people who works in nuclear power plants, for example. So they have a higher risk associated with their occupation. So make sure that they have adequate protection facilities just in case something goes wrong. So these are the control measures. Nothing more to study. Just everything can be written with pure logic. This is about radiation pollution. Coming to the next topic, that is e-waste. What is e-waste? Electronic waste. Okay, so we have everything, right? Email, e-market. Correct. Everything is now in electronic form. So there is e-waste also associated with all these things. Basically, the discarded and end-of-life electronic products ranging from computers, equipments, etc. used in ICT, home appliances, audio, video products, etc. All these are together known as electronic waste or e-waste. You people often change your mobile phones, correct? Sometimes the mobile phone is damaged. You throw it away and buy a new mobile. So you just throw it away. What happens to that mobile phone? Sometimes you exchange it. But in other times, what happens? Or say battery. Okay, you put battery in your clock and timepiece or say torch. Correct. And after that battery is completely used, if it is not a rechargeable battery, you take it out and what do you do with it? How do you dispose it off? So these things actually pile up as electronic waste, and India is one of the biggest producers of electronic wastes. US, China, India, all these countries, top level electronic waste producers. So these are not hazardous if they are put in a safe storage. If they are handled with care, e-wastes are not hazardous because they can be recycled, reused, converted into something else. Clear. Problem is the e-wastes are never actually properly taken care of. You use a battery, it doesn't work anymore, you throw it away. It can go into the soil, and that battery liquids can actually leach into the soil and cause issues to the micro ecosystem. This is correct, right? Especially lead acid batteries and stuffs like that can cause huge environmental issues if not properly taken care of. Computers, mobile phones, they are all having something called as a motherboard, and there are certain metals inside this motherboard, say even traces of mercury. Okay, certain other metals which when exposed can actually cause issues. Clear? So these are termed as e-wastes. In India, situation is pretty bad. We do not have a streamlined mechanism, or at least it is not being strictly implemented. So there is no comprehensive state-wise inventorization of e-waste generation. Okay, we do not have any data, comprehensive data at least, on how much e-waste is generated per state and how it is categorized or segregated, etc., etc. Among the top Indian cities, Mumbai ranks first, obviously, followed by Delhi and Bangalore. This is very logical, considering how much electronic activity takes place in these areas, metropolitan cities in general. So most of these e-wastes are actually recycled in India. But who does it? Does this happen under scientific supervision in an organized sector? No. The recycling happens in unorganized sector. You have seen this, right? Scavengers, okay, or these kinds of people who collect waste from different places. They take it to some local area, and they segregate it, and whatever they do with it. Correct. So this is unorganized units. There's no proper scientific monitoring. The people who are handling these waste are actually in very big danger. It's not like our usual organic waste or plastic waste. E-waste can create huge issues if not properly or scientifically treated. Correct. So this is the major issue. Most of the e-wastes are recycled in the unorganized sector. So in order to curb all these issues, what we have to do, we have to give proper education to these people, awareness, and most importantly, we have to develop alternate technology to effectively segregate and effectively take care of e-waste in India. Clear? Now, solid waste. What is solid waste? Solid waste actually is basically the discarded materials. Discarded solid materials, whatever it could be, abandoned and considered waste-like material, whatever it is. Any garbage, refuse, sludge from wastewater treatment plant or air pollution control facility and other discarded materials, including solid, liquid, semi-solid, or contained gaseous materials resulting from industrial, commercial, mining, and agricultural operations and from community activities. So basically, this is a very broad terminology. Solid waste does not essentially mean the things that are just solid. No. Semi-solids are included. Sludges that we get from water treatment plants and air treatment plants are included. Okay, this is a very broad term. But what is excluded? It does not include solid or dissolved materials in domestic sewage or solid or dissolved materials in irrigation or industrial discharges. These things are not included under this term solid wastes. Okay, it includes everything other than the solids and dissolved materials from domestic sewage, irrigation, and industrial discharges. Okay, so one of the examples is plastic waste. Plastics were actually a boon. Okay, for some time ago, plastics were a real boon. Why? Because it has immense use. The moment plastic was invented, it spread faster than coronavirus actually. Okay, I mean it's very much useful thing. We know we can buy plastic carry bag from literally anywhere. Correct. So initially this was a very boon thing. We can construct literally anything using plastic. It's very much manageable. Correct. User friendly. Problem is, as much as it is user friendly, it is not eco friendly. Especially because of our own method of its disposal. It has caused considerable environmental hazard because of its throwaway culture. You buy some say provision from your nearby store, and the person gave you that in a plastic carry bag. You took it home. What do you do with the carry bag? Maybe if it's like looking pretty, you will use it again and again, but otherwise throw it away. Correct. You will throw it away along with your organic wastes, or you will simply burn it. All these has huge environmental implications. So what are the effects? Land gets littered by plastic bag garbage and becomes ugly and unhygienic. Correct. Needless to say this. If you have seen some garbage cans in the roadside, you would have also seen plenty of plastic bags surrounded there. People simply collect all the waste into a plastic bag and throws it into the garbage bin or throws it into a adjacent water body, thereby contaminating the entire environment. Conventional plastics has been associated with reproductive problems in humans and wildlife. This is conventional plastics. Right now, various improvements have been made in it. But even then, at the earlier stages, there were severe reproductive issues in both animals and human beings. Dioxin. Dioxin is a very highly carcinogenic agent, which means it creates cancer. This is actually a byproduct of the manufacturing process of one of the chemicals which is believed to have been passed through breast milk to the nursing infant. When plastic is manufactured, One of the byproducts is dioxin. Clear? And this is also one of the products when you burn plastic. You have that particular smell, right? When you burn plastic and all. So when you burn it, dioxin is released, and dioxin is toxic and carcinogenic. And this can transfer from mother to the child while breastfeeding. So huge health issues. Okay, burning of plastics, especially PVC, polyvinyl chloride. You know the PVC pipe and all. Very useful, but at the same time very dangerous if not properly taken care of. So when you burn PVC, what happens is two things comes out: dioxin and furan. Both are extremely dangerous. Plastics disturb soil microbe activity. Yeah, plastic are non-biodegradable, correct? So this will last in the soil for a very, very long time. The microbial activity is hindered. Okay, the soil is, soil is basically imbibed with something that does not disintegrate or decompose for a very, very, very long time. So animals, when they try to, eat food and all, plastic might go into their throat. You have seen pictures of dogs, etc., etc., accidentally entering its head into a plastic bag and suffocating. You have seen such videos and pictures all over internet, correct? So overall, huge negative impacts. That is why we are trying to do away with plastic and replace them with paper bags, jute bags, cotton bags, etc., etc. Clear? So broadly, solid waste can be classified into different subheadings. So based on their source, they are classified as municipal waste, hazardous waste, biomedical waste or hospital waste, and municipal solid waste. Okay. Now, municipal solid waste will include the household waste, construction and demolition debris, sanitation residue, waste from streets, etc., etc. All right. So not much important. You know what these are. Taking the two important topics specifically. Hazardous waste. What are hazardous waste? Mostly this consists of waste from industrial sectors and hospitals, because they contain toxic substances. They are very highly toxic for human beings, animals, plants. They are explosive. They could be inflammable. They can be corrosive, highly reactive. Correct? So direct exposure to chemicals in hazardous waste such as mercury, cyanide, etc. This can be fatal also. Understood? So these are considered as hazardous waste. Now hospital waste. This is even peculiar, very peculiar. Why? Because hospital waste is generated during diagnosis, treatment, or immunization of human beings. Correct? Think about vaccination. Okay, say COVID-19 happened, and every country in the world started the vaccination drive against COVID-19. We have Covishield, Covaxin, Sputnik, okay, and Pfizer, etc., etc. All these vaccines, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, all these vaccines are there. Every person who goes to a hospital to take this vaccine should get vaccinated using a new needle. Correct? One needle cannot be used to inject the same thing for everybody. It has to be changed every time. So what happens? Where do you dispose of these needles? That needle will have your blood, correct? Your blood, some portion of your blood will be there. Some quantity of that vaccine, whatever it is, will be there. So this is a biomedical waste. If not properly disposed of, can create huge implications, huge health implications. If the person who is injected with that needle has some sort of disease, infectious disease, for example, if that needle is simply thrown into the garbage bin, it can create a pandemic. Correct? So these all are under the topic of hospital wastes. Formaldehyde and phenols, disinfectants, mercury, which is used in thermometers. Okay, disinfectants, for example, in a hospital and scenario, there is adequate cleaning every X number of hours. That place has to be sanitized and cleaned. So when you use all these chemicals to sanitize these places, all the germs and bacteria, etc., etc., all these are cleansed. Correct? Where does this water go? It has to go somewhere. So you simply take it all into the drains, and this drain is connected to a water body, and that water body is done for good. Correct? So these kinds of primitive method of handling waste has to be changed. Okay. Similarly, other hospital waste such as solid waste, disposables, anatomical waste, cultures, discarded medicines, syringes, bandages, bodily fluids, all these can cause severe issues. Okay, so after this notification of biomedical waste handling and management rules in 1998, these establishments are slowly streamlining the process of waste segregation, collection, treatment, etc. etc. We have a set of rules intact in order to how to handle these kinds of wastes. So how much is it implemented? That is the question. We have a set of laws on how to take care of these things, but how many of them follow the law? And those who follows the law, how much strictly they follow the law? All these are questionable. So how do you treat these wastes anyway? We know that such wastes are generated. So what are the ways to handle them? There are plenty of ways. Okay, one is open dump. Open dump means throwing away. That's it. Basically throwing away. Collect everything together and dump it in a place. Very bad method, very primitive method, very stupid method. You collect all the waste and put it into some open area, uncovered area. The waste is untreated, uncovered, and not segregated. So there is organic waste, plastic waste, hazardous waste, everything together dumped in one area without any kind of treatment, without any kind of covering. After one rain, the entire area would smell foul. All the toxins and hazardous things will leak off to different areas, will be a breeding ground for all kinds of pathogens, and results in huge humanitarian crisis. So open dumps, very bad idea. Landfills. Landfills are basically same idea, except they are covered. So you dig a pit. Okay, put all garbage into that pit and then cover it. This is landfill. Here the problem is, in certain cases, the waste is properly segregated. Okay, plastics are not dumped into this pit. Plastics are taken into recycling plants and all. And the organic waste, the biodegradable waste, these are dumped into the landfills and covered with sand. The good thing is it is covered, so it does not have immediate connection with atmosphere and other environment. Problem is, again, when a rain occurs, what will happen? Everything will leach. Okay, this organic activity, when organic waste is dumped into the soil and covered, it will obviously decompose, decay, correct? It will produce all sorts of things, methane, and also and such similar gases. It also creates lots of sludges and various kinds of chemicals. So with the addition of rain or say a groundwater source, these things will leach into all the nearby water bodies, thereby rendering those things unpotable. So again, landfills, if not properly taken care of, is a bad idea. Sanitary landfills. This is an upgrade of landfill. Okay, landfill is the primitive thing. Next step is the sanitary landfill. So what here happens is exactly same as the landfill, but the problem of leaching is solved. How? When you dig a pit, this pit is actually lined with impermeable substances such as plastics, clay, etc. etc. Plastics means, there are biodegradable plastics and all. So you can use environmental friendly plastics. Clear? So line this with something impermeable, clay or plastics or whatever. So you can prevent leaching. Correct? So this is a good idea, sanitary landfill. Only problem is it's extremely costly. So most people does not invest into these things. Now, incineration plants. What are incineration plants? Incineration plants are also a bad idea. It is usually used as a last resort. What happens is you collect all the waste. okay, especially the solid waste, and you throw it into a furnace, which is burning at a very high temperature. Okay, so usually the recyclable materials are taken away, like plastics and such stuffs are taken away, segregated into a different compartment and taken for recycling. But the remaining waste, the solid waste, are dumped into this furnace, which burns at a very high temperature. So what happens? When these substances are burned, they produce a lot of toxic substances, toxic ash, pollutants. Clear? All these things are produced, and this will cause associated issues. So incineration is a last resort, and we use that only to deal with infectious wastes. So when you burn, say, hospital waste, okay, say something which has contaminated with blood or something like that, when you burn it at very high temperatures, the bacteria, the germs, etc., will die. Correct? So these are the wastes that are usually put into an incinerator. Otherwise, they are used as a last resort. Pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is essentially the same. Okay, the idea is the same. You burn the waste. Only problem is, here the combustion happens in the absence of oxygen or under controlled atmosphere of oxygen. So what happens? That whole thing is much more controlled. The gas and the liquid thus obtained can actually be used as fuels. Okay, when you put, say, some carbonaceous waste into a pyrolysis furnace, what happens? It will produce things like tar, methyl alcohol, acetic acid, acetone, fuel gas. All these things can be used. These are all useful things. Okay, it does not go into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. No. These, because of the lack of oxygen, these things does not get oxidized, but instead are turned into certain things that are useful. So pyrolysis is a very promising approach. Composting. I think you know what composting is. Basically, you add microorganisms, mainly fungus and bacteria. You add them into decomposable or, say, degradable organic wastes like humus and all, and these microbes will do their job and convert them into manure by decomposing them, and this can actually be used as fertilizers and manures for nutrient poor areas. Vermiculture, basically introducing earthworms, earthworm farming. Okay, instead of microbes, here the job is done by earthworms. Earthworms will eat up all these organic wastes, and their excreta is highly useful as fertilizer. That is why earthworms are known as friends of farmers. Correct? Then the 4 R's. Can you see this? There is one more title at the bottom. It's called 4 R's. What are the 4 R's? Yesterday we talked about the 4 R's. They are refuse, reduce, recycle, and what's the last one? Reuse. Okay, so these 4 R's are very important. We studied the 4 R's yesterday, so I'm not going into that right now. So these are the usual processes by which we take care of solid waste. Now, waste minimization circles, WMC. So this WMC basically helps small and medium industrial clusters in waste minimization. Okay, try to minimize the waste so that we can, their disposal becomes a secondary question. Of course, there will be waste, so we have to dispose it. But if we can limit the quantity of the waste generated, then disposal will become comparatively easier. Correct? So WMC is aimed at clustering, helping these industrial clusters, small and medium industrial clusters, to reduce their production of wastes. This is a project assisted by the World Bank with the Ministry of Environment and Forests and Climate Change. And this has also got assistance from the National Productivity Council, NPC. So to realize the objectives of this policy statement for abatement of pollution 1992, this has been implemented. According to this policy statement, the government should educate citizens and about environmental risks, economic and health dangers of resource degradation, and the real economic costs of natural resources. Basically, you have to make the people aware of these issues. Okay, so recently we had this climate summit, okay, in Glasgow. At that time, a lot of things were discussed, but in many cases, we were not able to reach a proper agreement. Why? Because certain people are not convinced, or they are not willing to accept the dangers of environment. Correct. Some people just simply brand them as others as environmentalists, and doesn't consider about them. That's correct, now. Say, for example, certain countries withdrew from the Paris climate deal, which is essentially trying to save our environment. These are actually negative acts. Correct? So same thing happens here also. When you talk about waste segregation or disposal of waste, people are either lazy or they simply, do not take an active part in it. All they have to do is, when they generate a waste, they have to take care of it properly. That's it. If you are using a plastic bag, properly dispose it off according to the regulations and rules. That's all you have to do. But sometimes, because for convenience, or say because we are lazy to do something else, we dispose it off along with organic waste, and it creates a huge issue. So that is all about solid wastes. Now we come to thermal pollution. While I taught you about aquatic ecosystems, I had mentioned about thermal pollution. That is basically adding a hot water or very cold water into a water body, which elevates or decreases the water temperature at a high rate, thereby causing issues for aquatic organisms. That is basically thermal pollution. Okay, and the major sources of this thermal pollution are power plants, water used as cooling agents in industrial facilities, deforestation of soil, shoreline, soil erosion, etc., etc. What happens if we cut down the trees in the river banks and all? The temperature at that region will rise up sharply, thereby destroying the microclimate that is prevalent there. Correct. So this is basically thermal pollution. So based on the type of water, temperature of water, there are two kinds of thermal pollution. One is based on warm water and the other one is based on cold water. This slide is a bit congested, sorry for that. I will upload it in the Telegram channel. At that time you can download it and use it. So what happens when you add warm water to the water body? I have explained this in the previous classes, so I'm not going to take too much time now. If anybody does not remember, please refer to my aquatic ecosystem class. Okay. So when you add warm water decreases oxygen supply. I have taught you how this happens in the previous class. And it also affects ecosystem composition. So let's look at it. Okay. So warm water contains less oxygen. Dissolved oxygen content is always less in warm water. Eventually, this decreases the rate of decomposition of organic matter. Okay, when the water is warm, initially, because some oxygen is already present, the rate of decomposition will increase. Problem is, decomposition will also take in a lot of oxygen. So eventually, the oxygen content or the dissolved oxygen in the water will depreciate substantially and will severely harm the aquatic ecosystem. The green algae are replaced by the less desirable blue-green algae. The metabolic activity of aquatic animals will considerably increase. So what happens when metabolic activity increases? You will have to consume more and more food. So there will be food shortage in the ecosystem. There will be competition. Okay, when there is a food shortage, you will go to some other place in search of food. That is, the migration will happen. And when you go there, you will enter into a competition with the existing community there. So this is very, very unhealthy. So eventually it destroys the entire thing. Clear? Similarly, principal adverse changes can include rendering the cell walls less permeable to necessary osmosis, coagulation of cell proteins, and alteration of enzyme metabolism. These cellular level effects can adversely affect mortality and reproduction. So basically, through a process called osmosis. I hope you know what osmosis is. You might have studied this in chemistry or biology in your school days. Okay, so these kinds of processes are very necessary in sustaining life in an aquatic environment. And thermal pollution basically destroys the ability of the cell wall to do this osmosis, both osmosis as well as reverse osmosis, coagulation, enzyme metabolism. All these things are negatively affected. You don't have to go into too much chemistry about it. Just understand that all these are under threat. Higher water temperature increases plant growth rate. So when the growth rate is increased, what happens? Lifespan will reduce. Also, population increases. Okay, if you increase the growth rate, what happens? Since the growth rate is very high, the lifespan reduces, but population increases. More and more new plants will starts to come up, and the death rate will not match the birth rate, so the population keeps on increasing. This is how algal blooms occur. One of the reasons why algal blooms occur. Okay, main reason is eutrophication. You know that. Other than that, thermal pollution can also cause algal blooms. And when algal blooms happen, what happens? There is reduced light intensity, which means it decreases the aquatic photosynthesis, leads to the increase of plant respiration, reduced oxygen content, reduced food content, destruction of aquatic ecosystem. All these are the effects of warm water. What about cold water? Cold water is just the reverse. When it is added into the water, it affects aquatic ecosystem again, especially fishes, larvae, microinvertebrates. Productivity itself goes down. So both these spontaneous activities can cause severe issues in aquatic ecosystems. What are the control measures? Simple. Don't discharge such warm waters and cold waters directly into lakes or rivers. Instead, make them into a normal temperature and then dispose it off. Just hold them somewhere first. So through evaporation and all, it will naturally assume the ordinary temperature and then discharge it into the water bodies after proper treatment. Cogeneration. Cogeneration is actually a process through which excess heat energy from generating electricity can be used in another manufacturing process that needs such energy. So this warm water has a lot of energy, correct? Cold water may not have that much energy, but warm water possesses a lot of energy. That is why it's warm. Its temperature has been raised to a certain level. So you might as well use this energy to something useful. That is known as cogeneration. Clear? Then do not devegetate. Do not cut down trees. The shades of the trees are one of the prime factors that might be holding down the temperature in many areas. Say for example, a pond, a stagnant water body, a pond, and then there is a tree which is growing in the side of the pond, and it is providing the shade to a considerable area of the pond. The temperature of water in that area will be less compared to temperature in a very exposed area. So if you cut down that tree, then here also the temperature will rise very quickly and destroy the aquatic ecosystem. So you might as well plant more trees and do not mess with deforestation. Okay, now plastic pollution, marine. What happens when a lot of plastic is dumped into a marine ecosystem? I'm simply going to read through this because these are very much rudimentary and very much logical. You can derive or write all this from your own perspectives. So basically, plastic waste is very well known as primarily from fishing related activities and non-point sources of influx. Correct? Fishing related activities, nylon threads. The nets that you use for fishing are made of nylon threads, which are very harmful for aquatic ecosystems. Okay, a lot of endangered and aquatic organisms get trapped in these threads, nets. Okay, and these nets are often thrown into the sea as when you dump it, and a lot of animals and aquatic organisms get trapped into this, cannot get out. They will die. In certain cases, these nets are broken down into very, very small pieces and aquatic organisms ingest them. Okay, ingestion doesn't affect an aquatic organism as such. Why? Because it is plastic. It is bio-inert. Okay, very micro-sized particles. Otherwise, they will suffocate and die. So this is micro-sized particles. They won't, I mean, there is no negative impact as such. Problem is, plastics are very helpful in bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Other toxins will deposit on this plastic and starts to accumulate and eventually magnify. So plastics can actually enhance the rate of biomagnification of toxins. That is how they are a severe issue. Clear? Similarly, the rate of UV-induced photooxidative degradation of plastics floating or submerged at sea is very much slower. That is also correct. In land, the UV rays, etc., can to an extent photooxidize the degradation of plastics. It takes a very long time, but even then, it happens. It may take a decade or maybe even longer. But still, at some point, it is happening. But in aquatic ecosystem, think about it. There is no UV rays as such, correct? If a lot of plastic waste are dumped into the sea floor, it's going to be there for a long time. Okay, so the life of plastics underwater is much longer than on the land. Unlike on land, there is no easy means of retrieval. Also correct. You can pick the garbage in land and segregate them easily. But can you do that in sea? No, right? There is a huge garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean. Just Google it. All the garbages that has been dumped into the sea, a lot of them has accumulated and there is a garbage patch there. And actually various initiatives are there trying to clean it up. Okay, now impact of microparticles challenging the Antarctic krill and other zooplanktons. That is why what I just explained. Plastics are broken down into very microplastics. They are biologically inert. So they by themselves does not cause any issues. But what happens is they facilitate biomagnification of other toxins. And this can lead to severe issues. Now, that is all about plastics on marine life. What about in our terrestrial ecosystem? Think about it. Just look around you and you will know everything. Problems with uncollected plastic waste include the following. Chalking of drains. We know. Okay, plastic, we put the plastics into the drainage, manholes and all. And when rainy season comes, everything is washed into the road and all sorts of diseases will start occurring. Correct. So choking of drains, causing of illness and possible death of animals. I explained this point earlier. Non-biodegradable and impervious nature of plastics disposed on soil, which may arrest recharge of groundwater aquifers. Yes, earlier I told you we use plastic coating on sanitary landfills. Correct? What is the idea there? Plastic is impermeable, which means it prevents leaching, which also means it prevents water from going through it. So basically, if there is a lot of plastics in the underground level, then it prevents the recharge of underground aquifers. Clear? Similarly, presence of additives and plasticizers, fillers, flame retardants and pigments used in these plastic products. This can be of huge adverse effect into the environment. So these are about plastic pollution. Now, bioremediation. You might have heard about this term a lot. What exactly is bioremediation? If anybody is feeling saturated or too much overwhelmed, please feel free to pause this video and watch it at another time. I know that this is a lot of information, but I'm taking this anyway because once I finish this class, you can rewatch this anytime you want at your own pace. Okay, so bioremediation. What is bioremediation? Basically, it's the use of microorganisms, especially bacteria and fungi, to degrade the environmental contaminants into less toxic forms. You may not be able to completely decompose everything, but you can render them less toxic. That process of using microorganisms to make them less toxic is known as bioremediation. So this bioremediation process can be monitored indirectly by measuring the redox in the soil. Redox means reduction and oxidation potential. So if you monitor the redox potential of the soil, you can measure the bioremediation process. Okay, along with redox, you have to consider the groundwater level, you have to consider the soil type, pH value, temperature, oxygen content, electron adapter or donor concentrations. Okay, all these things has to be considered. But using all these markers, you can actually monitor the bioremediation potential in a given area. And there are plenty of strategies that are adopted for bioremediation. So how does this happen? How do you use microorganisms to reduce the toxicity of a waste? Again, a very congested slide. Sorry for that, but I hope this is readable. There are two broad strategies to deal with this. First of all, in situ bioremediation, and then second one, ex situ bioremediation. In situ means what? In-site. Okay, wherever you need to adopt this strategy, you do it there on site. Ex situ means off-site, where the thing that is contaminated is taken somewhere else and it is bioremediated, and then once it's clear, it's brought back. That is ex situ. So in situ method actually includes three sub methods. One is bioventing, biosparging, and bioaugmentation. What is bioventing? Bioventing means supply of air and nutrients through wells to contaminated soil to stimulate the growth of indigenous bacteria. So if an area is contaminated, find a well, and then use this well to supply air and nutrients into the underground. You have already dug a well, and it goes very deep. Supply air and nutrients into this well. So what happens? It contains a lot of microorganisms, and these nutrients will add more, it will enhance the growth of microorganisms. So bacteria, fungi, all these things will sprout up, and they will automatically start their work, and the whole area can be bioremediated. This is known as bioventing. Now, biosparging. What is biosparging? Same process, but we do not use a well, but instead we inject the air under pressure below the water table to increase the groundwater oxygen concentration. Okay, we have already talked about the dissolved oxygen in water bodies. So in the groundwater also, this DO level is there. We will inject air under very high pressure into this water table. So what happens? Oxygen level of this underground water table will increase. This will facilitate decomposition, correct? This will facilitate the growth of microorganisms, and microorganisms will do their job. This is known as biosparging. Last one, bioaugmentation. Bioaugmentation means you bring in microorganisms from somewhere else into the contamination site and add them directly at microorganisms. You are not preparing an environment for their growth, but instead you are bringing them yourself and adding into the environment. This is known as augmentation, bioaugmentation. So these are the in situ techniques to take, to conduct bioremediation. What about the ex situ techniques? First one, land farming. This includes excavation of the contaminated soil, spread it over somewhere, and then continuously, and repeatedly till the soil. Okay, suppose a soil is contaminated, you excavate the entire soil. Okay, take it to some place else, you spread it over, and then you expose it to atmosphere. You repeatedly till it, you treat it, etc., etc. And once the contamination is gone, put it back. This is known as land farming. Now, biopiles. What is biopiles? Biopiles are usually used for treatment of petroleum hydrocarbons. Okay, pollution caused by the petroleum hydrocarbons. Basically, it is a hybrid of land farming and composting. So the land farming technique, again, same, the excavation is done, that soil is taken to some place else. There you add in microorganisms, just as you do in composting. And once the composting is completed and the soil is decontaminated, it is taken back into the area. This is known as biopiles, predominantly used for decontamination of petroleum hydrocarbons. Next comes bioreactors. What are bioreactors? It involves processing of contaminated material through engineered containment system. So lots of techniques happens within it, and not so much important for us. But there are certain engineered facilities to decontaminate these things. So the contaminated things are taken into this facility, decontaminated, and gets back. Composting. Cherry has developed a mixture of bacteria called oil zapper. You might have heard about this particular bacteria. Oil zapper, this bacteria has this capability of decontaminating or degrading oil contaminated sites. Okay, they are oil eaters. Just as the name says, they are oil eaters. And they does not leave behind any harmful residue. So they are especially useful in when there are marine pollution with oil. Sometimes shipwrecks occur, and if it is a ship carrying a lot of oil, that entire oil will cover the top layer of that area in the sea. Huge issues with aquatic ecosystem. This happened very recently. You might have heard about it. So oil zapper is one of the best ways to deal with it. It is a particular bacteria developed by Terry, which can decontaminate such oil contaminated sites. Okay, so these are the bioremediation strategies. But apart from these strategies, there are certain other techniques, other approaches also, especially in genetics. We have invested a lot of amount, and we have came a long way in genetic modifications, genetic engineering. Correct? And one of such things is known as phytoremediation. What does this phytoremediation mean? It means the use of plants to remove contaminants from soil and water. That's it. Phyto itself stands for plants. Phytoplankton means plant. Correct. So phytoremediation means use of plants to decontaminate soil and water. There again, here also plenty of processes are there. I will quickly go through them. Please try to by heart or at least remember what is what. Okay, first one, phyto extraction, which is also known as phyto accumulation. Basically, the plants accumulate contaminants into the roots and above ground shoots and leaves. These plants are genetically modified such that they are capable of absorbing or accumulating the contaminants into them. Okay, so plants will absorb these contaminants from the surroundings into them, thereby decontaminating the area. This is known as phyto extraction or phyto accumulation. Then we have phytotransformation or phytodegradation. Here, the uptake of organic contaminants from the soil, sediments, or water and their transformation to more stable, less toxic, less mobile form. So here in the phyto extraction, only accumulation takes place. In phytotransformation, it takes in the contaminants and then it transforms them into something which is more stable, which is less toxic, and which is less mobile. If it is more stable, then it won't react that much fast, correct? If it is less toxic, then it is less dangerous. If it is less mobile, then it does not spread too fast. So that is phytotransformation, another brilliant method, result of genetic engineering. Phytostabilization. This is a technique in which plants reduce the mobility and migration of contaminated soil. They bind the soil with their roots, specifically engineered roots, thereby preventing the mobility or migration of contaminated soil. That is known as phytostabilization. Then you have phytodegradation. Okay, and it's a subcategory known as Rhizo Degradation. Within phytodegradation, you have phytodegradation. Basically, is the breakdown of contaminants through activity existing in rhizosphere. In the soil, you know about the rhizobium and rhizophora and all these things. So in the topsoil layer, there are a lot of contaminants that which are very much active, which are very much mobile, etc., etc. So this process of rhizodegradation basically break down these contaminants and prevent their activity in this rhizosphere. Then rhizofiltration. This is a water remediation technique that involves the uptake of the contaminants by plant roots and a particular bacterium known as Deinococcus radiodurans has been used to detoxify toluene and ionic mercury, which are released from radioactive nuclear plants. Okay, so this particular bacterium has been very much effective in detoxifying toluene and ionic mercury, which are released from radioactive nuclear plants and all. This technique is known as rhizofiltration. I know these are all very confusing. Too much information, too much data. Sorry for that, but still, these are basically, one sentence thing, one word and one sentence. So we are very much used to studying these sorts of things. Read it again and you will be able to identify. Mycoremediation, another technique. Bioremediation, in which fungi are used to decontaminate the area, is known as mycoremediation. Okay, whenever there is this myco term in this word, it has something to do with fungus. Okay, then mycofiltration. Here also, fungal mycelia or filter toxic waste and microorganisms from water in the soil, using something that is related to fungal or say fungi. So these are the main techniques that comes under genetic engineering approaches of dealing with contamination of soil and water. So what are the advantages of bioremediation? One advantage is that they can completely destroy a wide variety of contaminants. Okay, they may not be able to destroy or decontaminate the whole thing, but still a wide variety of contaminants can be effectively dealt using bioremediation. They are less expensive. Initially, the research and development will be costly, but afterwards they are very much less expensive. They are environment friendly. Adding bacteria or other microorganisms does not destroy the environment. They are eco-friendly. But what are the disadvantages? These are limited to some biodegradable compounds alone. Compounds that are biodegradable alone. Bacteria and fungus cannot decontaminate soil which is ridden with plastic. Correct? They cannot deal with synthetic things which are non-biodegradable. Similarly, biological processes are often highly specific. Yes, correct. This is the limitation. They are useful against a lot of things, but they are completely useless against certain other things. So these are very specific, target specific. It is difficult to extrapolate from bench and pilot scale studies to full field operation. Again, true. When this is conducted under a laboratory setup, or when this is done as a pilot project in a highly controlled area, it might yield results. But when this is taken to the real world, how effective are them? It is a question. Correct? We don't know. Maybe these won't sustain in a real world scenario. The feasibility may not be as much as expected. Then, bioremediation often takes longer time than other treatment processes. Also correct. You are injecting bacteria or fungus or whatever. Think about it. It takes a long time than other quicker methods. Correct? If you want to deal with, say, plastic and all, segregate it and recycle it. If you want to deal with organic waste, best thing to do is put into a pyrolysis chamber. It's done. Now, think about adding bacteria and fungus into that. It takes a long time for decomposition to happen. Correct? If you are creating a biologically engineered plant and you are expecting that plant to take in all the toxins from the surrounding, how long will it take? That seed has to germinate, it has to grow, it has to become a plant. Correct? So something that could be easily done in a week will take maybe months or years to succeed. So these are the disadvantages of bioremediation. So that topic is done. Now, acid rain. Don't worry, there is only some more topics. We won't go too much late. I know that it is already 9:09. We will finish quickly. Okay. Now, actually, these are my shorter classes. Okay. While I used to take history, you might have seen the videos. Some of the classes actually goes for 3 hours and all. Okay. But I do not have any intention in keeping you here for that long. So I will try to finish this as quickly as possible. Acid rain is a topic that I took when I was teaching you aquatic ecosystem. So I'm going to read through this. Basically, acid rain is caused by sulfur and nitrogen. Okay, sulfur compounds and nitrogen compounds in the atmosphere basically causes acid rain. Usually, the pH of acid rain is less than 5.6. You know that pH of 7 is neutral, less than 7 means acidic, and greater than 7 means alkaline. You know this, right? So less than 5.6, that is where we consider the rain as acidic, or it's an acid rain. Acid rain can be of two types based on acid deposition. One is wet, other one is dry. So what is this wet deposition? If the acid chemicals in the air are blown into areas where the weather is wet, the acid can fall in the ground in the form of rain, snow, fog, mist. Everything has moisture. So such a deposition is known as wet deposition. Correct? And this can be happening in two ways. Wet deposition itself can happen in two ways. One is rain out, other one is washout. Rain out means here the incorporation of particles into the cloud drops which fall into the ground. So these sulfur particles and these nitrogen particles, these are incorporated into the cloud itself. Okay, and then it drops into the ground. This is known as rain out, just like a rain happening. Washout means they won't get incorporated into the cloud, but instead, when the rain actually falls down, these particles present in the atmosphere gets absorbed or dissolved in the rain and comes out. So this is washout. Okay, first one is rain out, which means the particles are absorbed in the cloud. Second one is washout, which means the rain coming down will wash the atmosphere and dissolves all these gases and comes down. So these are the types of wet deposition. Next is dry deposition. Just as the name suggests, dry deposition means the weather is very much dry. Okay, so what happens? Instead of dissolving into moisture or any other kinds of aqueous solution, the dry particles will get accustomed into dust or smoke. Okay, and then they will settle down somewhere, say some surface. And when the concentration increases and keeps on increasing, after some time, when water is introduced into it through a rain or some other sources, they will start to react and destroy the entire thing. Think about Taj Mahal, for example. Okay, if there is a lot of dust and smoke surrounding it, these kinds of acidic particles can come and settle in the marbles of Taj Mahal. Okay, so when they are solid and dry, they may not be reactive. But once in a while, the rain will come down and dissolves these acidic things. And then what happens? It will start to react. So these acidic things forming H2SO4 and nitric acid, they will react with the white marbles of Taj Mahal, and the chemical reaction takes place, destroying the entire structure. Similarly, this happens on plants, human body. Okay, we can get all kinds of skin diseases. Plants can lose their chlorophyll content in the leaves. Okay, so these are the types of deposition of acid rain: wet deposition and dry deposition. Now, common characteristics of acid rain areas. Where are they found? What are the common characteristics of the areas which are subjected to acid rain? First of all, they are concentrated in industrial belts in the northern hemisphere. Yeah, southern hemisphere, the amount of land area is very, very less. Okay, it is in the northern hemisphere that we have the predominant land area, and most of the industrialized nations are on the northern hemisphere. So this is a favorite area of acid rain. Often upland and on mountainous areas which are well watered by rain and snow. Yes, if acid rain has to happen, then precipitation has to happen. So upland areas where water and snow, rain and snow is prevalent, this area is again favorable for acid rain. Possesses numerous lakes and streams and also have more land covered with vegetation. Also correct. Because these are the conditions that favors precipitation. Okay, so if these conditions coexist with industries and factories, then obviously acid rain will occur. Often have thin soils and glaciated bedrock. Yeah, correct. Then in India, in India, the first report of acid rain came in Bombay in 1974. Instances of acid rain has been reported from metropolitan cities. Clear? So these are the main areas. So here often have thin soils and glaciated bedrock. What does that mean? They are mountainous regions. The soil will erode down. Okay, so thin layers of soils are usually seen in mountainous regions, which are again very favorite area for precipitation, glaciation, snow. Okay, now indicators. The best biological natural indicator of acid rain is lichen. Lichen serves as a good bioindicator for air pollution. How? In a variety of pH of 6 around 6.0, several animals, those are important for food items, for fish, will decline. And these include water shrimp, freshwater shrimp, crayfish, snails, and small mussels, etc. etc. So when the pH lowers and becomes acidic, this will affect certain life forms which are very much expressive. We will start to notice it. Best example, lichen. So areas affected by acidic rain can be easily identified by the presence of these organisms, presence or absence of these organisms. Clear? Now, impact of acid rain. Very simple topic, so going to go through this a bit fast. Soil. What happens when acidic rain falls into the soil? Acidic rain means basically sulfuric acid and nitric acid. So when these acids are poured into the soil, what happens? Leaching of nutrients, making the soil infertile, decreases in respiration of soil organisms. Yes, increases the ammonia. Yeah, I mean, when nitric acid is falling, it has a lot of nitrogen, correct? So ammonia will be very, very high. Impact of acid rain on soil is less in India. Why? Because Indian soils are very much alkaline. Okay, with very good buffering ability. So when acid react with alkali, it forms salt and water. So basically it neutralizes away. So India's geography is a very good buffer against acidic rains. Now for vegetation, what happens? Discoloration happens. Loss of foliar biomass happens. Loss of feeder root biomass, especially in conifers and all. Premature aging of all needles of conifers. Prodigious production of lichens on affected areas. I told you, lichens are one of the best markers. So the affected areas will have a lot of lichens. You can see it yourself. Okay, so these kinds of changes will be happening on the vegetation as a result of acid rain. Microorganisms. Optimum pH is the best for most of these microorganisms, bacteria, fungus, etc. etc. Everybody wants near neutrality. pH of 7 is the most sought out pH, but most fungus or most fungi prefer an acidic environment. Most blue-green bacteria prefers alkaline environment. Okay, so think about it. Microbial species in the soil and water will shift from bacteria to fungi and cause an imbalance in the microflora. Correct, right? Fungus prefers acidic, bacteria prefers alkaline. Okay, so when acidic rain happens, what will happen? The area will become more and more acidic, which means there will be a shift in the micro flora and fauna from bacteria to fungus, thereby completely changing the composition of that habitat. Okay, in wildlife, what will happen? It directly affects the eggs and tadpoles of frogs, salamanders that breed in forest ponds. Completely affects the aquatic flora and fauna. I'm not going to explain any of this. These are very simple points. For human beings, what will happen? Foul smells, reduced visibility, irritation on the skin, eyes, respiratory tract. If in a very high rate, then it will also cause chronic bronchitis, pulmonary emphysema, cancer. Okay, so basically very bad for everyone. It can damage materials, Taj Mahal being the best example. Socio-economic impacts are there. When acid rain happens, crop losses can occur. The quantity of fish available in an area can fluctuate. This can decrease or deteriorate our national income, the GNP, per capita income, everything is interconnected. The entire economy is based on our environment. So if the environment is affected negatively, it will have adverse repercussions on our economy as well. So what are the control measures? First of all, buffering. Okay, acid rain is basically acidic. So add something alkaline, thereby neutralizing it. This is known as buffering. The practice of adding a neutralizing agent to the acidified water to increase the pH and bring it around 7. This is known as buffering. And usually lime in the form of calcium oxide and calcium carbonate is used. Then the other obvious control measures are to regulate the emission of sulfur dioxide by desulfurization, low sulfur fuel, etc., etc. Then decrease emission of the nitrogen oxide compounds, modification of engines, thereby increasing the efficiency of these engines. Okay, now the last slide for the day, categorization of industrial sectors. Our government, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, has developed some criteria of categorization of industrial sectors as red, orange, green, and white. There are 4 categories based on color codes. So these categories shows or points towards a particular pollution index. And this index is basically a function of all kinds of emissions and effluents and hazardous waste, etc., etc. Okay, air pollutants, water pollutants, hazardous waste, consumption of resources. Everything is made into a function and put together into the pollution index. So pollution index will reflect all these things in it. The pollution index is actually for the industrial sector. Pollution index for the industrial sector will actually range from 0 to 100. A higher score of PI value denotes the increasing degree of pollution. Okay, the more the value of PI, the higher the pollution. So 0 is the minimum value, which means 0 pollution, and 100 means maximum pollution. Clear? But this is the old categorization, and government had to, government recently revised it. Okay, I hope you remember. There was very recently there has been a draft which was put out by the Environment Ministry regarding the revision of all these things, which earned a lot of protests and opposition from the people. I hope you remember. Then plenty of amendments were made into this draft regarding the environmental impact assessment and all. Okay, I hope you remember. So the new category of white industries, which is practically non-polluting, will not require environmental clearance and consent. This is one of the new decisions. So red means they are immensely polluting. Then comes orange, then comes green, and then white. White means 0 pollution. Okay, so those industries which comes under the white category are practically non-polluting and hence does not need any kind of environmental clearance for setting them up. Just as that, no red category of industries shall be normally permitted in ecologically fragile area or protected area. Obvious, huge impact on environment. So red category industries are usually banned in ecologically fragile areas. Please read about that draft by the Environment Ministry, which was later on passed and all. So look into that, read through the new environmental policy, and it will be very much useful for your prelims as well as your mains. Okay, so by this, we have come to the end of this chapter, which is a huge chapter on pollution. We have finished this in 2 classes. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share with your friends. I will upload all my notes in my Telegram channel. The link is shown here. It is also given in the YouTube description section. Okay, so thank you again. We will see again tomorrow at 2 p.m. for our CSAT lectures and at 8 p.m. for our environment lectures. So until then, bye-bye. Good night.